President Biden repeat debate debacle. Good morning. Welcome to Amir Shakil 5858. I am Amir Budnam. I am thankful to all international news resources and my team. I am also thankful to all American, European, Canadian, Australian, Asian, African channels and AP, AFP and Reuters news agencies. Now watch the channels. Rather, headlines. In press conference, German President sees no medical problem in Mr. Biden. Evangelical Church in America. NATO support for Ukraine. Israel and Hamas is still far away from the negotiation table. A medieval cathedral on fire in France. Hurricane Beryl hit Vermont. Millions of Texans are still out of power. U.S. Attorney General under contempt. Consumer price index goes down in America. On Wall Street, Dow Jones Industrial increased, S&P 500 and Nasdaq decrease. Actress Shelley Duvall dies. Politics and religion. 2 Russian spies in Australia arrested.
Good evening. I'm Jeff Bennett.
And I'm Amna Nawaz. On the NewsHour tonight, President Biden holds a critical press conference amid calls for him to step away from the campaign.
And in an exclusive interview during this week's NATO summit, Germany's chancellor says he's not seen anything to make him doubt President Biden's ability to lead.
I think it would be a big mistake to underestimate the president.
Plus, Judy Woodruff examines the intersection of religion and political polarization by visiting an evangelical church known for its hardline views.
Thank you.
Welcome to the NewsHour. President Biden is facing a high-pressure moment, preparing to hold his first solo press conference in several months at the NATO summit in Washington. It's a major public test for the president's re-election campaign as he faces questions over his stamina and his health.
Earlier today, 3 of the president's top campaign advisors met with Senate Democrats behind closed doors to address concerns over his political future. Some lawmakers expressed skepticism.
We begin our look at the day's other headlines with the latest NATO support for Ukraine. Leaders spent the third and final day of their summit in Washington discussing the state of the alliance and Ukraine's goal of becoming a member. The U.S. announced another $225 million aid package for Ukraine. President Biden reaffirmed America's commitment during a meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
And he made it clear Russia will not prevail in Ukraine. Will not prevail in Ukraine. Ukraine will prevail. And I want you to know we're going to be with you every step of the way.
Zelensky welcomed the support, calling it strong news, but he added that Ukraine needs the U.S. to lift limits on firing its weapons deeper into Russia if it hopes to win the war. In the Middle East, Israel said its negotiating team is heading to Cairo for continued talks for a possible ceasefire deal with Hamas. That comes as Israel presses its offensive in northern Gaza. More displaced Palestinians fled Gaza City today to head south following the latest evacuation orders from Israel. Also today, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told the military graduation ceremony that Hamas is to blame for any lack of progress in those ceasefire talks.
I am committed to the framework deal for freeing our hostages, but the Hamas murderers are sticking to demands that contradict the framework that endanger Israel's security. The way to release our hostages is to continue pressuring Hamas with all our might.
At that same ceremony, Israel's defense minister called for a state inquiry to investigate Netanyahu and his entire cabinet, including himself, for security failures around the October 7th Hamas attacks. Yoav Gallant said that the probe, quote, must be objective. It needs to investigate all of us, those who make decisions and those who carry them out, the government, the military, and the security agencies. There is relief in France tonight after firefighters put out a blaze at the city of Rouen medieval cathedral. Cell phone video captured smoke billowing from the spire around midday. Authorities have not provided a cause, but reported only minor damage after the fire was put out. The cathedral was a favorite subject of Impressionist Claude Monet and is considered one of the finest Gothic churches in France. The scene was eerily similar to the 2019 fire that devastated Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. The landmark is set to reopen in December after a major restoration. The storm system that was Hurricane Beryl has now pushed into Canada, but not before dumping torrential rains on Vermont. At least one person has died and more than 100 others had to be rescued after more than 6 inches of rain fell in some parts of the state. Roads became rivers as rushing water slammed into businesses and homes.
I don't even know how much water came from where, because I mean, it's just mud everywhere now, and I haven't been inside. I don't know what's going on. This is, in my impression, catastrophic. I've just never seen anything like this.
The images today echoed scenes from when the state was swamped by deadly downpours at exactly this time last year. In the meantime, in Texas, energy officials say that 500,000 customers still won't have power by next week. Beryl knocked out electricity to 2.7 million homes and businesses when it made landfall there as a Category 1 hurricane on Monday. Frustration has been growing over the pace of getting power restored. The U.S. House of Representatives rejected a Republican effort to hold Attorney General Merrick Garland in inherent contempt for refusing to turn over recordings of President Biden's interview from his classified documents case. The lawmakers wanted to fine Garland $10,000 a day until he did so. 4 Republicans joined all Democrats in rejecting the measure. It was the latest such effort by GOP members who voted last month to hold Garland in contempt of Congress. Even if the resolution had passed, it was unclear how it would have been enforced. U.S. consumer prices dipped last month for the first time in 4 years. The Consumer Price Index, measuring the costs of everyday staples like gas, groceries, and rent, fell by 0.1% from May to June. That's the first monthly decline since May of 2020. Prices are still, though, 3% higher than the same time last year. But the cooling prices are welcome news for Federal Reserve officials as they consider whether to cut interest rates. And on Wall Street today, stocks struggled following that inflation data. The Dow Jones Industrial Average added about 30 points for a minimal gain. The Nasdaq dropped by more than 360 points after hitting records for 7 straight sessions. The S&P 500 also fell back from a recent all-time high. And a passing of note. Actress Shelley Duvall died in her sleep at her Texas home, according to her longtime partner. Duvall was a protege of director Robert Altman, starring in 7 of his films, including Nashville and 3 Women. But many fans will remember Duvall for her role opposite Jack Nicholson in Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. In the 1980s, Duvall started producing children's television shows before leaving Hollywood in the 1990s for her home state of Texas. She lived the rest of her life mostly away from the public eye. Shelley Duvall was 75 years old. Still to come on the NewsHour, Judy Woodruff examines the role religion plays in political polarization. And a first-of-its-kind fashion show highlights the work of indigenous designers.
This is the PBS NewsHour from WETA Studios in Washington and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
Today is the final day of the NATO summit here in Washington. At the top of the agenda this week, sustaining and expanding support for Ukraine.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Israeli troops have killed at least 30 Palestinians in the Gaza City neighborhood of Tal al-Hawa. The attack came a day after Israel ordered all civilians in Gaza City to leave, despite them having no safe place to go. Al Jazeera.
Tonight, breaking news as we come on the air. President Biden just moments ago in that high-stakes news conference, unscripted, live, taking questions. with the world watching. President Biden, the NATO summit in Washington, and one more critical test to save his campaign. His first solo news conference in 8 months. And the new ABC News Washington Post poll tonight, what it shows in this race between President Biden and Donald Trump. It is a tied race, even with the debate. And the poll asking about a hypothetical matchup between Vice President Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And what would happen if she was at the top of the ticket. What the poll reveals. Tonight, the extreme 65 million Americans. Alerts right now. The staggering heat moving into the east again. And in Texas tonight, more than 1 million customers without power now days after the hurricane came barreling in. They are in sweltering temperatures. Lee Goldberg standing by with the forecast heat now moving into the east. Tonight, the manhunt for a person of interest wanted in the killing of a young sheriff's deputy killed in an ambush. The news tonight coming out of the Baldwin trial is taking aim at a crime scene technician, asking about the lack of surveillance video. Good news on the economy tonight. Inflation now slowing to 3% in June. A rate cut. Tonight, the intense search for a missing 14-year-old girl from Utah, vanishing while visiting her grandmother. Near New York City tonight, shark sightings forcing parts of a popular beach to close. And tonight to actress Shelley Duvall. Her unforgettable roles and one performance still giving audiences the chills.
This moment matters. We must rise to meet it.
Tonight, the breaking president in a solo conference. That poor showing at the presidential debate.
I'm the most qualified person to run for president. I beat him once, and I will beat again.
Isn't enough quiet concerns within his own party.
I'm not in this for my legacy. I'm in this to complete the job I started.
The CBS Evening News starts now.
Breaking news: President Biden, a time ago, a high-speed conference for his pain. President coming to the cameras this evening for a rare solo news conference, saying he's not in the race for his legacy, but to complete the job he started. Answering questions China, war, and God, but Mr. Biden stumbling, mistakenly referring to his vice president Harris as President Trump. As several of his closest allies tell NBC News, they now believe his chances of beating Donald Trump are zero. One Biden campaign official saying, quote, he needs to drop out. He will never recover from this. All of it as the president prepares to sit down for our exclusive one-on-one Monday. Also tonight, deadly floods in the Northeast. Burrow's remnants slamming Vermont, washing out roads, sweeping away an apartment building, more than 100 rescued. And extremely heat. 500 without running
news. You're racist, Joel. If you call views moo wearing mascot Joy Behar. Men are sexist if they're not a fan of Kamala's laugh or funny women in general, especially if they're in bed. Roll it.
What really ticks me off about him, though, is this laughing Kamala remark. It's such a sexist remark because a guy I was with over the weekend, a friend of mine, they said Kamala's laugh was. But they said that about Hillary's laugh, that she was cackling. And men, you know, they don't like a funny woman. We're afraid if you laugh or you make a joke, that maybe you'll do that when they're in bed with you.
Oh my
Joy Behar in bed? Ooh. I thought cows slept standing up. That has nothing to do with anything. Michelle. So now if you... we make fun of everybody's laugh.
Absolutely.
This is always going to be their default position.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Just like Jen Psaki is saying about Kamala, that, you know, we're a racist, sexist society if we don't keep up with her amazing image or her vision and her ideology. It's just so annoying. I am so sick of this. I remember after Hillary lost in 2016, my mom would tell me, oh, God, I've got to listen to all my liberal friends say, well, she lost because she's a woman and people can't stand the thought of a woman. No, we couldn't stand the thought of that woman in office.
Right.
There are plenty of women I could see. I'd love to see Condoleezza Rice run. She's one of many, you know? Oh, and she's black too. So, you know, but this idea that just because you make a comment, and by the way, Kamala's laugh, call me sexist, it is annoying and it's constant. And I say that not because she's a woman, but because her laugh is annoying. Period.
I think it's funny that, I think, Vince, her laugh is the least of her problems.
That's what I'm saying. She could diffuse this thing if she just comes out and says, look, I know I have an annoying laugh. Let's talk about other things you have with me. But the problem is the other things are worse.
Yes.
So what are you going to do? Bring up the border? You're going to bring up how you talk to people like they're 3 years old? So, yeah, she almost can't diffuse it. But when is she going to actually step forward at any point in time and tell everybody, hey, look, he's the president. Something happened to him. I'm next up.
Yeah.
I don't know why you guys are worried about laughs. I'm ready to go right now. She's been MIA. So you know what? That whole administration seems to hide. So she hides behind people like Joy Behar defending her. She hides behind the laugh comment. I mean, all these people do is hide.
Yeah. And
breaking news on this Thursday night. Joe Biden's embarrassing mix-up on the world stage. What he said as the crisis for the U.S. president deepens. A Manitoba man is convicted of murdering 4 Indigenous women. The reaction. And why his defense of not being criminally responsible was rejected. Players and fans out of control. What ignited this brawl in the stands at a Copa America game. And a warning before heading into the water.
We've seen a really big increase in the amount of rescues.
The potential dangers of using inflatables in oceans and rivers.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
After 2 weeks, a whale rescue team has finally managed to free a young right whale. It was in fishing gear at the St. Lawrence near Rimouski. The North Atlantic right whale, one of the most endangered species in the world. Caroline.
Yes, Mitsumi, they are on the danger of extinction list because there are only about 360 of them left in the world, and each and every one of them is well known to researchers. The whale that became entangled is a 1.5-year-old female calf. She was born in 2023 to a whale named War, or 1812, and she became caught up in fishing gear almost 3 weeks ago. Now, she was first spotted with ropes around her back and in her mouth on June 22nd by someone from the Canadian Whale Institute mission off the coast of New Brunswick. And along with a team from Campobello on that very first sighting, they were able to attach a satellite buoy to her ropes to track her, and that began a large-scale operation that included Fisheries and Oceans Canada monitoring her. Now, thanks to that, a rescue team was able to get close to her several times in order to partially remove the ropes, but she was only completely freed near Rimouski yesterday.
So it's a long adventure with this.
Tonight, Joe Biden's risky play to stay on the presidential ballot.
I beat him once, and I will beat him again.
In public, unscripted, under pressure. But many are already thinking ahead.
Let's say Joe Biden withdraws.
Well, what about that? We've got it covered. Security and economic interests collide in a Canadian deal to build icebreakers. Online influencers spread bad takes on sunscreen.
Sunscreen is a scam, and here's why.
I never wore sunscreen.
How those armed with the facts are fighting back.
From
Welcome to France 24's Night Watch programme. These are our top headlines. US President Joe Biden makes two major name mix-ups as he addresses the world press at the conclusion of the 75th NATO summit. The mounting gaffes not helping when his mental capacities are constantly being put in question. We'll bring you more of the latest developments from the summit, including the new pledges to help Ukraine, which they say is on an irreversible path to membership. And in other world news, intense fighting and airstrikes continue in the Gaza Strip as peace talks in Qatar hit a roadblock. Welcome to the Night Watch on France 24. I'm Alexander Orcott. Now, a little earlier on, we were listening to the US President Joe Biden, who was fielding questions from the world's media in his first solo press conference in 8 months since last November. It comes off the back of the 75th NATO summit, in which he accidentally named the Ukrainian leader as President Putin. At the top of the conference, he also mixed up the name of his running mate.
I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, because I think she was not qualified to be president. So let's start there. Number one. The fact is that the consideration is that I think I'm the most qualified person to run for president. I beat him once, and I will beat him again.
Well, despite these gaffes, he went on to speak for the best part of an hour to the world's media, fielding questions partly about himself and whether or not he should step down, and partly on wide-ranging issues of international policy. Questioned on whether he should take a neurological exam to reassure voters, he replied that every single day was a test for him. Our Washington correspondent Fraser Jackson joined me earlier to say whether or not he passed.
Takes to be president.
Fraser Jackson reporting there. Now, even before these latest gaffes, President Biden was getting increasing calls to stand down from within his own party following the disastrous performance against Donald Trump in their live debate. 14 Hill Democrats have now called for him to step aside, while other influential party members have stopped short of endorsing him.
Of his agenda.
What do you say to We're coming back now to the NATO summit, where Ukraine was a top topic of conversation. The 32 members have announced that it is on an irreversible path to joining the military alliance and pledged vastly more support, including imminent arrival of F-16 fighter jets and other air support. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky gave thanks.
First of all, we appreciate the decision on air defense as soon as possible, so that as many lives as possible can be saved.
Well, among the NATO leaders there was the French President Emmanuel Macron, of course. He's been a particularly strong voice in Europe when it comes to supporting Ukraine, though he too was questioned about Joe Biden's frailty following the Zelensky-Putin name mix-up. Let's take a listen.
I will abstain from making any comments on American domestic politics, of course, so we can all have a slip of the tongue. It's happened to me. I'm sure it will happen to me again tomorrow, and I'd ask you to be just as kind to me as caring, kind people. With President Biden, I had a long discussion at yesterday's dinner, and I heard his discussions at various meetings, and I saw him as a president who is very much on top of things. He knows the issues, and around the table he is amongst those who has the greatest depth of knowledge on these international issues, and he is exemplary in his commitment to Europe, and as an ally, he is unwavering.
We're bringing it back now here to France, where there were celebrations across the centre and left of politics as the far right was kept from power in the recent parliamentary elections, the snap vote called by President Macron. Well, now the path to forming a government remains unclear. No party or grouping gained a majority, although the left-wing bloc did win the most seats ahead of Emmanuel Macron's. The president wrote an open letter saying no one won his snap election. Nonetheless, the bitter feuds threaten to keep French politics in a state of paralysis for some time.
In front of the cameras, they're all smiles.
an early Macron follower, who announced Wednesday that he wanted to build a new group, ranging from the social right to the socialist left.
Well, before we move on from France, we take you to the north of Rouen, where laser of the world-renowned Gothic cathedral earlier, as restoration works were ongoing. It raised fears that another of the nation's architectural gems could be lost to the flames 5 years after the Notre Dame Cathedral here in Paris was badly damaged, though that has now, it appears, been avoided. Intense fighting and bombardments have continued in the Gaza Strip, particularly around Gaza City in the north, even as truce talks have been in full swing in Qatar. The Israeli Prime Minister has now demanded that his forces be allowed to maintain control of a corridor along the border between
tensions on the border of Israel and Lebanon threaten to escalate into an all-out war.
Finally, after almost 60 years of hurt, England football fans are again desperately hoping that football is coming home. Gareth Southgate's side have benefited from the easier side of the draw, it must be said, along with some controversial referee decisions in their match against the Netherlands, which helped them along. So would their luck now keep on going or run out against Spain? Here's a look ahead to the match.
With 4 days to go until the final, Spain are in a relaxed mood.
Mali's military junta says it will allow political parties and associations to resume their activities. The announcement on Wednesday came 3 months after they were suspended, purportedly to safeguard public order. At the time, political parties were protesting against the military government's decision to stay in power beyond a March 2024 deadline for returning to civilian rule. A national dialogue for peace, which started days later, recommended the military remain in power for 2 to 5 additional years, and that the current head of the junta be allowed to run for any future presidential election. In the past 2 years, the junta has broken its long-standing alliance with France and its European partners to turn militarily and politically towards Russia, and it kicked out the UN peacekeeping mission MINUSMA, deployed to help restore stability in the north.
Footage released by a non-governmental organization showed migrants diving from a dinghy into the Mediterranean on Tuesday after masked people began boarding from another boat. The video was shot from a rescue boat sent by the SOS Mediterranean humanitarian organization. It said that among those rescued were 4 women and 3 children. During the rescue operation, 2 unidentified boats came over. 2 armed people with covered faces boarded the wooden boat, generating panic among the shipwrecked people who started throwing themselves into the water. Our crew promptly rescued them, but one of them, once on board the ocean, collapsed. 2 of the masked people then sailed away in the wooden dinghy. The Associated Press news agency was told to immediately clarify who they were. SOS Mediterranean decries growing insecurity stemming from the lack of rescue vessels. The lack of rescue vessels left by countries in recent years in the Mediterranean has generated an increase in the presence of armed people and the illegal and dangerous actions towards the fleeing shipwrecked people and aid workers. New constraints imposed by local authorities hinder the rescues of the Mediterranean.
Taking a decision to start sea informal settlements. These are informal settlements that are in danger zone. There are about 800 of them. So God to find land.
The authorities say the ban was expected to go until they possibly.
The National Olympic Committee on Tuesday unveiled the final list of sports delegates which will represent Morocco in the 2024 Paris Olympic Games. In total, 60 athletes comprised of 42 men and 18 women will participate. Put in effort to do our best so that we can get the best results to represent Morocco well. With only days left before the Olympic Games, we are ready except for some small in order to reach the highest level for the Games. This is the second delegation to Morocco after the one sent to London 2012. We are here to celebrate the selection of athletes who have qualified for the 2024 Paris Olympic Games. Personally, I by the Paris Olympics will be held from Friday, July 26th to Sunday, August 11th.
ABC.
The plot of a crime novel. Two Russian-born Australian citizens living a seemingly quiet life in Brisbane, all the while working to infiltrate Australia's national security architecture. This morning, news the Australian Federal Police and spy agency ASIO arrested and charged the pair. Brought that plot into reality. The married couple accused of trying to feed defence intel to Russian agencies. We'll explain what's happened and its significance this Friday, live from Parliament House on Ngunnawal country in the nation's capital and recognising other custodians. I'm Matthew Doran and this is your afternoon briefing. Great to have your company. Let's get straight into it this Friday afternoon and begin with the arrest of two Russian-Australian dual nationals on allegations of spying for the Kremlin. The Australian Federal Police and domestic spy agency ASIO revealed the sting this morning. What's most troubling for authorities is how the married couple got inside the nation's defence systems. The woman, a serving defence systems analyst, coaching her husband how to access sensitive material and allegedly for use by Russian intelligence services.
The AFP has charged two Russian-born Australian citizens with the first ever espionage-related charge since new laws were introduced in 2018. They are a woman aged 40 and a man aged 62. The woman is an Army private in the Australian Defence Force.
I've been briefed extensively by our security agencies, including the AFP, including as...
This is Asia Now.
A very good afternoon. It's 2 p.m. in Singapore and Hong Kong, 11:30 in New Delhi and 1 o'clock in Jakarta. I'm Ilakhe Silveraji. Your headlines this hour. US President Joe Biden stands defiant, insisting he has no intention to end his campaign for re-election in November. But new gaffes, stumbles and missteps at a press conference are raising doubts about his political future. Also warning to China on its alleged support for Russia in the Ukraine war, President Biden says he's working to curb China's cooperation with Russia and he's ready to deal with leaders of both countries. And 2 Australians charged with spying offences. It's believed that they were conspiring to share defence secrets with Russia.
Thank you for watching and privilege of your time. This is Amir Shakil 5858. I am Amir Woodman. Have a good life.